So the resolution reads, a crypto-maximalist perspective focusing exclusively on Bitcoin over all other blockchain projects is the most effective path towards expanding both liberty and a more decentralized world. So again, that is what we are debating. We are going to get started. We are going to do 10 minutes, and the defenders of the resolution will start, and that will be Team Bitcoin. So that is up to you guys for how you want to do your 10 minutes, but we're going to get the clock up on the screen in just a moment, and you guys can start whenever you're ready.
Sorry, guys.
1 second, we'll get that clock going.
It's going. I mean, it's not going. But I mean.
As long as you can see it, it's fine.
All right, can everybody see that?
How as visible as we can make it. Okay.
Are you Moses?
We'll start.
Tyler, whenever you're ready.
All right. Just want to start off. Really honored to be here. Big fan of Liberty on the Rocks, and stoked for the opportunity. Bitcoin stands on its own merits. Doesn't really need this debate, but Liberty on the Rocks does. Society needs this debate. We all need this debate. There's an infamous Art of War quote that says, if you wait by the river long enough, the bodies of your enemies will float by. Bitcoin has been waiting by the river for over 14 years. Many blockchains have floated down the river past Bitcoin over the past decade. The debate's currently being settled by the market. CoinMarketCap lists nearly 26,000 alternatives to Bitcoin. So many more bodies will eventually float by. Bitcoin has longevity, a proven track record, but it was not the first cryptocurrency. There was DigiCash, eGold, Hashcash, BitGold, eCash, Cybercoin. Some of y'all might be familiar with Liberty Reserve. Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency not to fail. Each subsequent attempt has been a cheap, generic, store-brand knockoff replica attempting to be Bitcoin. So as long as there is money, there will be alchemists. But replication is impossible. You cannot copy Bitcoin. You cannot copy the vast proofs of work, the lack of leadership, the grassroots network of nodes, the provable and credible coin issuance and scarce supply. Thus, these alternatives are not as secure, they're not as immutable or as decentralized, and they're not as critical to human flourishing in the future. Those seeking to copy Bitcoin signal a lack of understanding of the properties that makes Bitcoin valuable and viable money. We've all heard the adage that that money doesn't grow on trees, but today's paper currency is literally grown on stocks, mostly cotton and linen, and digital money, which is over 99% of the currency in circulation, is minted even easier than printing. So if time is money, we've heard that adage as well. And then that money is debased, your time is being taken from you. The fruits of your labor are rotting away. And so inflation is insidious, illegal taxation with inadequate representation. And Bitcoin is inflation through peer-to-peer verification. Bitcoin is energy money separated from state control. You can't bail out the laws of physics. There isn't overdraft protection on the laws of thermodynamics. There's no need to fractionally reserve the law of conservation of energy. There's no deposit insurance for the joule or for the watt. You cannot rehypothecate time or energy, and it's impossible to debase the electron. So I would add that we need Bitcoin because it's a global savings and value transmission layer that governments can't confiscate through inflation or theft. Financial self-sovereignty is the single most important path to expanding liberty and creating a more decentralized world. Bitcoin is more resilient to nation-state level manipulation than any other asset that humanity is conceived of. And quality money is synonymous with quality civilization. Rome, the Weimar Republic, countless others have been plagued by currency debasement through time. In 1526, Nicholas Copernicus famously said, "Nations are not ruined by one act of violence, but gradually and in an almost imperceptible manner by the depreciation of their circulating currency through its excessive quantity." Money loses its value most of all through excessive abundance. And so, freedom of speech, assembly, and expression all require an openly accessible, non-censorable, non-state monetary standard. And I believe Bitcoin is our last best hope against those that oppose liberty. to fully free the market and free the world, to increase liberty and the pursuit of happiness, it's now Bitcoin or bust. All other cryptocurrencies and blockchains are a distraction.
So let me remind you that the debate we're having is which cryptocurrency or which crypto asset is the best for furthering liberty, not which one will have the highest price or the biggest market share. And I'm going to argue that only Bitcoin has the properties necessary to further liberty because it has several unique attributes that make it stand out from every other crypto asset. So some of them are that it's truly decentralized, it is immutable, meaning that no power, no nation state is able to manipulate transactions. Crucially, it's an asset, not a security, meaning that it does not represent any debt, derivative, or equity in any enterprise. It has no shareholders, no corporation, no CEO, nor any other kind of administrator that can unilaterally make changes to it. It has an entirely fair distribution, which is to say it was worthless for years before it had any value, and no one involved in the project had any special allocation. It has always been the top cryptocurrency by monetary usage, market capitalization, and ecosystem adoption. And it requires no special hardware or permissions to run, and anybody with a regular desktop computer can run a full Bitcoin node. And then it has a network that is so robust that no nation state can manipulate it. And then it solves transaction frequency limits not by compromising security or scalability, but using a second layer network. So no other leading cryptocurrency meets any of these criteria, and no cryptocurrency meets all of these criteria. Every other competing crypto asset has to compromise on this decentralization, on the scalability, on having a central authority. Every other crypto asset makes key compromises that make it unsuitable for a money that will revolutionize the world. And then let me remind you that the key problem we're solving here is money. So every crypto project is a business model that solves different problems. And maybe some of them are successful, but what we need is a free market selling money. And so it must be money that solves the problem. Any project that tries to do something in addition to that, like Ethereum, compromises the essential properties that are needed for a global sound money. So none of the other 20,000 plus cryptocurrencies can solve all these criteria. The vast majority are basically securities promising a future payoff, but very few practical applications. None of them are going to promise liberty for the world. So I'm going to make a few specific points about why Bitcoin has unique properties. And one I mentioned is the not security, meaning that every other project has some entity basically running it. And when you buy, you're not buying an asset, but you're nesting in an enterprise. Another important asset is that Bitcoin is proof of work. Every other project is, a lot of the major competitors to Bitcoin are proof of stake. And that is a fatal compromise to the security model. Because under proof of stake, the existing powers that control the asset, the stakers, can manipulate the network. So the rich get richer in the proof of stake model, and it's very hard to any outsider to buy in. There's a high entry barrier because you have to buy billions of dollars in Ethereum to meaningfully compete in the Ethereum network. You need major cloud infrastructure to participate in proof of stake, with proof of stake you can have attacks where you try to basically fork the chain that are much easier to conduct if you have a centralized network than it is with Bitcoin. Because with Bitcoin you have thousands of individual miners that are independent. It's much harder to manipulate that kind of network. And so proof of stake is a fatal compromise to the decentralization. And that's the key thing we need for a sound money system. The other thing I want to argue is that we don't need privacy coins, because that's the other position people have, is that one is we have proof of stake, but the other one is we need more privacy because it's not private enough. And it's technically ignorant argument. First of all, there are privacy solutions for Bitcoin, such as CoinJoin, but it's not technically feasible to have the scalability of gold money and have the features that we have like in Monero. And so the point is that Bitcoin is the optimal balance between having privacy and having the scalability to be the world's money. And crucially, Bitcoin solves the scalability problem through second layer networks, which are robust in Bitcoin, the Lightning Network. A lot of other networks, they try to have many more transactions in the base layer chain, but they compromise the decentralization. So a lot of other nodes, like Ethereum, you have to have an SSD and your graphical hardware, and a lot of other projects compromise even more. You have to get permission from this central authority to run a chain. And so we have to maximize the decentralization and the censorship resistance of the network for a sound money that is crucial for the world. So only Bitcoin is able to meet all these criteria.
All right, thank you, Team Bitcoin. We'll get on the topic in a moment, and then Team Crypto or Team Blockchain will get to respond. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Go.
Okay, so I think this is a hard argument to stand on because I myself am a crypto and digital asset believer. The majority of my holdings are, in fact, in Bitcoin. So to sit here and represent the other side of the argument while also holding the majority of this asset should really show that we're all on the same team and that there's not one or the other. My first exposure to these assets were in 2017, and I've now grown to launch a trust that I'm a trustee of that custodies Bitcoin and Ethereum for a solo 401k. And I also believe, speaking with this community, that we should be focusing more on local and state government rather than federal level entities, and that's where we can see the largest change. This is why I believe in the power of blockchain and decentralization, because beyond Bitcoin, there are other opportunities that we have to interact with networks and have a voice and a role within. My first experience with decentralization was the most freeing moment I could have ever experienced in my life. It was when I was in 5th grade and downloaded Eminem off of Napster because my parents wouldn't let me listen to it. And this was peer-to-peer networks. So right there, I already experienced my first taste of freedom, and it wasn't through a money. Bitcoin maximalism, I think, today gets a bad rap because you see a lot of newer market entrants who might be espousing the virtues of weightlifting and eating meat and hating seed oils. But really, this was a natural response that was necessary for an emerging asset that had no supporters. Maximalists were necessary in 2010, 2011, 2012, because everyone was shitting on Bitcoin. Everyone was saying the government could shut it down. People were terrified that, like, China would stop the miners, which at the time comprised more than 60%. So as we're going through this conversation, I want people to realize that decentralization is a spectrum. We're not just talking about, are there tens of thousands of miners, but what are the farms? Who are the powerful entities that verify these blocks? If you look at Bitcoin's top 3 miners, they consume 60+% of the network. So you have 3 entities that are responsible for validating the majority of the blocks. There's also codes, code language. How many programming languages can a blockchain network support? The more robust the languages, the more people can participate in those networks, the more decentralized they can become. And while they might not be monies, they're still offering opportunities for freedom for people to participate within. I'm also not here to say that shitcoins, meme coins, pump and dumps, scams are a thing that I like. I think this is awful, but we've also seen these issues not just in decentralized blockchain networks, but also in custodial solutions like FTX. So there are bad actors along all sorts of paths. So why would I be talking about decentralization? Let's say I host a website that talks about fuck the state, and Amazon wants to take it down because AOC decided that this is a website that she's fervently against. There are powerful entities that can get my server shut down because 40% of the internet traffic runs through AWS. Through decentralized blockchain networks, you can have a domain name service. You can store your information on decentralized networks where nobody can shut you down because there's a peer-to-peer network of people that are validating the information that you put on there. What if you want to create a way for people on the internet to communicate with one another and to have a valid voting system so that participants of a community like Liberty on the Rocks can make voting decisions? Through decentralized autonomous organizations, you can do this in transparent, immutable manners, validating that the community was able to speak in a way that they wanted to. DAOs are something that are starting to become very, very important and more. Something that Tyler brought up was market data. And you're right, the market data doesn't lie. The majority of the market is dominated by Bitcoin, but there are also populations across the world that hold access to cryptocurrencies, not just Bitcoin. Thailand, 20% of the population owns crypto. Nigeria, 19%. The Philippines, 19%. Argentina, 18%. Brazil, 16%. Singapore, 15%. South Korea, 13%. These are people who are holding crypto, not just Bitcoin. So the market is saying that there's more need for something beyond Bitcoin. And then lastly, I want to say that there's decentralized finance that can offer opportunities for people to participate in ways to earn yield off of their digital assets, but I can't go into that because that goes into my time, so sorry.
Thank you, Dylan. Okay, cool. Wow, there's a lot to unpack here. This is such a great discussion. I just also want to say thanks again to Karen and Josh for hosting us. Thank you guys for hanging out. I want to preface this right now. All of us up here, this is framed in a sort of adversarial sort of kind of perspective. You know, we're having a debate. There's going to be a winner and loser. I actually reject that premise. We're all brothers in liberty up here. We're all, I believe, I just, you know, knowing what I know about you guys and Dylan, we all want a more freer world. The only means, I think, I would bet we would disagree, or we would agree on 99% of things, but we do disagree on this topic. But it's important to keep this in mind because if you get on Twitter, if you get on, it's mainly on Twitter, it's this holy war, this tribalism, and it makes me fucking sick because what we're doing with this tribalism, this crypto tribalism, we're repeating the mistakes of centralized institutions. Centralized institutions have a benefit. They see a benefit by creating tribalism, this either-or sort of thing, and making humans butt heads against each other. We now have credibly neutral, permissionless platforms that enable humans to connect, and we don't have to fight over these layers anymore. So I just want to preface everything with that. I mean, that said, there's certainly some important points of difference here, but crypto tribalism, I think, is a very ugly thing. Going back in the day, so I actually started the Ethereum community here back in 2014. Just some quick background. Back then, there was no maximalism. We were hosted at the Denver Bitcoin Center. Ben Ulrich, Mike Dupree, these local dudes. You know, back then it was just like, bro, cool, let's explore this new stuff. Maximalism emerged a little bit later on, I think, for some of the reasons Dylan mentioned there. But to me, it's like it's completely missing the point. So to talk about the resolution tonight, one thing, god damn, time's going fast. One thing I suggested, that you'll notice in the resolution, it says Bitcoin exclusively should be the focus for furthering human liberty. I made that suggestion because I think it reflects kind of the maximalist viewpoint, but it's also a much, I think, harder thing to prove. Demonstrably, there are other decentralized technologies that are furthering the cause of freedom. I'm going to focus on Ethereum because that's sort of more my background. That's the space I build in. Currently, Ethereum, let's use the example of free ROS. Who wants a free ROS? Yeah. Thanks to NFTs, digital rights, Ross was able to raise money for himself and his charity via selling, I think, some of his artwork via NFTs. This happened on the Ethereum network. Argentinians are using stable coins, not just Bitcoin, to preserve their wealth in the face of massive inflation down there, like crazy inflation. I believe like 70% of Argentinians own crypto, and half of those are stable coins. They're using non-Bitcoin to still escape inflation. He mentioned DAOs. So I work for a DAO. DAOs are incredible because they offer a wonderful path or a wonderful sort of difference from how we've done things with business and institutions in the past, and the fact that I can tell you the project I work for, we have $1.3 million in stable coins, and this is unambiguous. I can show you this, and thanks to the fact that this is open information on a decentralized blockchain, there's no question about that. So, okay, I got a minute to quickly respond to some of these comments here, and I can see the contours of, I think, the conversation we're going to have. But there's this notion that only Bitcoin is truly decentralized. And I'm curious to hear what true decentralization is. There is no perfect decentralization. Bitcoin maximalists like to say that Satoshi created this perfect thing, nothing will ever be like it. In fact, there are other ways to achieve decentralization. There isn't just this one sort of thing. As a litmus test, I would ask you guys, and maybe as we get into the questions, but could a state actor shut down various smart contracts working on Ethereum? For instance, the Treasury issued, Department of Treasury sanctioned Tornado Cash, which is a privacy-preserving solution on Ethereum, yet it's still live. They could not shut it down. This is like truly unstoppable code. So, this is kind of the crux of the argument here. Is only Bitcoin, does only Bitcoin have that perfect decentralization? And I would say demonstrably no. And I can point to examples of this. Okay.
You can wrap up.
Okay. Finally, the two other things. Bitcoin, I don't think it's enough. It's not sufficient. It's a tool. It's great for sound money. We need much more than smart sound money. Also, it's a flaw. When we're talking about something that's important, is human liberty, to put all our decentralized eggs in the same basket. We should work on multiple different technologies, because Bitcoin isn't perfect. Something could happen to Bitcoin. It's not it's descended from the heavens and flawless. So I'll stop there because I'm over time.
All right, so now we are going to do 20 minutes back and forth between our speakers, and then we'll go to audience questions after that. So I think we got 20 minutes on there. So the goal is to do 4 questions for each side. We may not get that. If you guys are having a good flow, go on, just keep going.
We ask for than we ask for?
We're just going to go back and forth, question to question. But if you guys are getting hot on a topic, just keep going. We'll start with Team Bitcoin. You guys the first question for Team Crypto.
Wait, Josh, I need clarification on the rules here. Am I starting time open or am I pausing?
Open time, just 20 minutes. And then we'll go to audience questions after that.
All right.
Okay, I'll ask a question. Do you think that lack of sound money is the root of the world's problems politically, and overwhelmingly the vast majority of the problem?
I'd say that's one problem. Sound money. It's easy to imagine a scenario where we did have sound money in the U.S. and maybe we couldn't inflate away things, but governments would still have an incentive to control what's happening, control the flow of information, control basically. To put it another way, we could have, let's say we had a system based on gold, a government based on gold. You can still imagine a lot of problems still existing in our society with respect to corruption, with respect to spending money, even though it couldn't be inflated, into the treasury, spending money in awful ways, other restrictions on human liberty. Sound money is certainly a very important component. And on that matter, though, I would also say that it's not necessarily a given that Bitcoin has a monopoly on sound money. I think it certainly is in a good position for that, but Ethereum also has sound economics as well. But for the sake of argument, let's just see that point to Bitcoin, because that's what Bitcoin is very good at, for sure. But I would say that is an oversimplification of it, even though it's a crucial element of a freer society. For example, privacy, and that's one point I think, David, I would differ with you on. Privacy-preserving technology is absolutely necessary given the authoritarianism that lurks in our world today.
I come from the stance that, yes, if you fix the money, you can fix a lot of issues, but I also think that poverty is a problem, and access to resources like healthcare and education, all these things that are being harder and harder to obtain for certain people in certain income classes, because there are powers that be that are strangling these holds at the top. We see the 1% getting richer and richer and growing further and further from the bottom 99%. And this is what I think Bitcoin does, is it provides this fiscal opportunity for people to get in at the ground level for something that is sound and for the people, by the people. But I also care about centralization. Who here has had their data leaked by Equifax or Target, or had your credit card information leaked? this is also something that bothers me. So I want to see in a freer society with more liberty, the ability for me to own my own data and to determine who can gain access to that and make money off of me. And this is something that we can do through decentralized cryptocurrencies, through Bitcoin, through blockchain networks. So it's not solely just blockchain and crypto, but this is an opportunity that decentralization also offers. So it goes beyond sound money, from just sound money in my perspective.
Can I bounce a question back? Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of dovetailing over. So let's talk about property rights. And this is one thing I really always appreciated. That you guys used to run ads and reason about property rights. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, like they'd be like, hey, like the government just completely fucked me and said eminent domain and stole my stuff. It's such a great job of raising awareness about that. Would you say that in a world where sound money is solved for, let's say Bitcoin is the global currency, is property rights still an important thing to preserve and protect, and potentially in a blockchain decentralized format? And if so, how could Bitcoin itself go about offering those guarantees?
I would put it this way: the control over money enables the majority of the rights violations that governments across the world do today. And what stops people from, ideally, if the government is abusive, you just move elsewhere. You just move to a better jurisdiction. And if everybody could take all their wealth and move to a different jurisdiction, that would put enormous restraint on governments to be abusive, right? Because you would lose the cows on your farm, right? You can't milk population anymore because they can move away. And why can't people move away to a better jurisdiction? Because you have all your property either in national currency, or if you can't trust national currency, you have it in real assets. Because of inflation, your property is in real estate, etc. So if you had some money, my basic thesis is that's the root of the problem as opposed to everything else. If you can take all your wealth and put it into Bitcoin and nobody can see how much you have or take it away, you just move somewhere else. So, even Bitcoin is only one kind of property. By making wealth portable, it solves the problem of property rights abuse.
All right, should I?
Can you comment on that or ask a question? Whatever you want.
Yeah, I think I'll kick off a question. Okay, so there's been numerous examples over the previous decade of local mile-high based teams starting and creating cryptocurrencies or blockchains. So I'll list a couple: Zcash, Fox Token, Cardano, Salt, Colorado Coin. And so my question to y'all is why have these fared so poorly against regulators, the dollar, and Bitcoin?
I feel like we can both maybe jump on DP. I can speak that, or?
I think the reason why those did so poorly is the same reason why GME and AMC stock aren't at the same peak that they were at the height of 2020. There are easy speculative ways for people to kind of get you excited about buying something, and people buy into it. It's why we buy lottery tickets. It's why we see people gamble. It's why we saw Pepe coin going up for no reason at all 2 months ago when the macro environment was completely, not looking so solid. Even today. Another thing that I would like to say is we're bootstrapping brand new nascent networks that were blueprints were given to us by Satoshi Nakamoto, who created Bitcoin and then walked away. I mean, how much of the original Bitcoin code is actually in today's Bitcoin code? It's very little. So I think when you're seeing these nascent industries popping up, there's bound to be failures. I mean, even a VC, they will bet on 10 companies and only one of them will succeed, but that one bet will outdo their 9 losses. So I think that we also have to take a grain of salt when it comes to starting these blockchain companies with the fact that 99% of them are going to fail, but the ones that do succeed are going to change the world drastically.
Well said, man. Yeah, kind of just to build on that, I think David did a good job of prefacing this with a reminder that we're talking about success in this case, in the context of our conversation, is this making the world a freer place? And yes, when you look at these specific tokens, yeah, it's rough right now. Like, you know, this is a bear market. It really sucks. You know, even the blue chips are down a lot. But yes, like something like Fox token, it was at $1. It's at 2 cents now. This is, you know, it's like holy crap. Maybe it went above 2 cents today. But you know, obviously this is certainly in crypto. We're at the then they fight you stage. And you know, you certainly have the SEC pushing back, and a lot of different things. Again, a reminder: we're all in this together. You see some Bitcoin maximalists, and I don't want to characterize. I'm just talking about in general. Certainly not saying this is your guys' opinion, but cheering on the SEC. And, you know, like, yes, go after Ethereum and other Bitcoin competitors. What? How libertarian is that? That's fucked up. Like, they're desiring government action. That stuff is ephemeral, I think, and will change. But the ultimate measure of success, and I say this working for Shapeshift, a company, or now a DAO, that's always been predicated on using crypto values to make the world a freer place. Here's just one good example. Shapeshift has incubated a project called Archeo. Archeo is, Shapeshift is a DAO based on Ethereum. Archeo will be a Cosmos-based project supported by, you know, Cosmos-based validators in that ecosystem. But its goal is to host all manner of node infrastructure, including Bitcoin infrastructure, in a way that no third party can shut it down. So this remains a big attack vector for crypto. Like it happens in Bitcoin, and certainly in Ethereum, and people are running nodes on AWS, or you know, that's an attack vector. Our goal is to build something out that using kind of this blockchain stack that makes things more immune, more censorship resistant. So I think one has to like kind of look from a wider approach here and say, okay, like what sort of progress is being made. Same thing with Shapeshift. You know, we've also always been about non-custodial or self-custody, not your keys, not your coins. We've certainly seen that with centralized exchanges shitting the bed last year, centralized lending. So yeah, I'd just say that's, you know, and Zcash similarly has done a great job, I think, of creating tech that can make the world a better place, a freer place.
So I would argue that when Bitcoin first launched, I could mine for Bitcoin using my computer, and initially that would give me some financial recompense for validating the network and securing it. How can your average everyday Joe today secure the Bitcoin network if they can't even mine from their own personal computer? What is the viability for the security of the network if we can't have tens of thousands of people mining? It's only, you know, dedicated to a handful of pools.
Yeah, so I would try to answer that in saying that pools are not the miners. The pools are a miner aggregate, and any miner, anyone deploying hash rate can elect to leave a pool if they're acting negligently, and it's also self-mining is still a possibility. There's a movement in the Bitcoin space called the pleb miners, and they sling around hash rates that are tiny, but they're still, you know, contributing to the network, and you know, it's a viable source. There's miners that are reusing recovering their heat that's produced from mining to heat their homes or greenhouses or their swimming pools, or a variety of different heat recapturing methodologies. I have a little PC in my backpack that would hash at about 22,000 hashes per second, which is minuscule compared to the Bitcoin network. The odds of me finding a block are essentially zero, but it's solo mining directly to my own net address without a pool. So it's possible. I could display it later. So I think the barriers of entry of mining are actually very low, despite the narrative. And you know, I think the pools, there's a lot of them. Yeah, there's some big ones, and if they ever act negligently towards the network, folks can elect to take their hash rate with them.
Let me just remind you, miners do not control Bitcoin. We've had cases where a majority of mining hash power wanted something, and then the Bitcoin community said no, and then they won. Miners secure the network, they don't control it. The real value in Bitcoin is the network effects. It's the commitment by the community to this asset becoming the world's money. That's the real value. And I believe in letting 1,000 flowers bloom. I forget who said that. But experiments are great. But again, the key problem is sound money for the world. And the real value here is the commitment by the community, the Bitcoin community, to solve that core problem. Let me ask a question in line with what I was saying. I think experiments are great. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. Let there be tons of crypto projects. But the key question is, after that experimentation, we have a real problem with fiat money. My family, I lost a lot of my family members in the Second World War, and I believe sound money would have made that not possible. And so, we need to focus on solving the key problems of the world. And if all these alt projects find technology that's better, Bitcoin can always incorporate it. But are they really addressing the root of the world's issues?
So my day job is I write about a blockchain called Neo. It has been around since 2015, arguably as long as Ethereum. And I'm sure Kent and I could have our own debate between the two of us on the merits of those networks on their own. But Unified Front, we run a side business where we also validate the network. And as recompense for validating the network, we get paid in a cryptocurrency called gas. Something that we like to do with this income is distribute it back into the community of builders, and there is a community of hundreds of builders in the Neo ecosystem across the world. So when we start talking about the world's problems, I certainly agree that fiat currency is one of them. Look what's happening with hyperinflation, look what's happening here. Look at how we can manipulate the world basically with the US dollar. That's great as long as we're in charge. But what's something I can do is I can take my council income and we can distribute it in the form of grants to people who want to build. And so one of the issues that we helped solve with our income, which is a cryptocurrency, is there was a group based out of Nigeria who wanted to incentivize the donation of blood. 27% of Nigeria's annual blood needs are met through donations. That's 73% of the country that is going, of the country's blood needs that are going without it. These guys created an NFT project that incentivized people to buy the NFTs, and then portions of those NFT proceeds went to people who donated blood, and they were able to not only receive compensation in the form of a cryptocurrency that they could trade for something that they wanted to trade locally, whether it's Bitcoin or cash or whatever the markets that they operate on use for their medium of trade. They were able to do this with the grant that we distributed. So sure, you can fix the money, you can fix the world, but you can also use mediums of exchange and invest into people who are making life-changing projects happen.
So a quick history lesson with respect to kind of Bitcoin, maybe adding stuff. Back in 2013, so I learned about Bitcoin, but I was kind of having the realization, it seems kind of limited. What else could be built on it? What could you have, stocks or tokens? And other people had the same thought, way more technical than me. And they were exploring things one idea was, has anybody ever heard of colored coins? Yeah. A way to build on Bitcoin. There's been a lot of clever people trying to build things on Bitcoin. Some awesome guys at Rootstock. If you guys have heard of them, they're great. They're trying to put smart contracts on Bitcoin. The fact is, though, Bitcoin is really good at one thing, trying to be sound money. Bitcoin's good at being Bitcoin, but I think objectively, it's much harder to do anything else because it has a much more finite. It's not designed to be this big expressive language. Ethereum, on the other hand, is designed to be kind of this big global settlement layer where you can do much more. Again, I reject the notion that something like Ethereum and Bitcoin are competitors. All this technology, these are just tools. I saw a poll from Michael Saylor, the MicroStrategy guy, and it was like, is crypto, or is Bitcoin winning the crypto war or something? To me, that's like saying, is hammer beating the screwdriver in the tool board? It's just a tool. Maximalists tend to get these like religious overtones. Bitcoin is good at what it does, but it's very hard to do things like, for example, create a decentralized exchange. This is something that has been wildly successful, primarily using Ethereum and other blockchains as well. I think like in 2022, something like $7 trillion was settled on Ethereum. And you could say, well, yeah, a lot of money is settled on centralized things too, but the difference is, it's difficult to imagine a scenario where a government or a group of actors is shutting down Ethereum. This is truly unstoppable code. So the world needs both, I think, sound money and a variety of other things like digital property rights, which NFTs have. This did not exist previously, and property rights are crucial both in a non-digital and digital context. So I guess to maybe dovetail the question back to you guys, how do you guys see Bitcoin adding that type of functionality? Because it hasn't really happened yet in a way that's kind of got caught on, and maybe why is that? And where is Bitcoin headed from here in terms of adding more functionality?
Sure. I mean, in terms of like NFTs, there has been some movement on that in Bitcoin lately. Not that it's terribly applicable. Like you're saying, Bitcoin's function built for one purpose, and it excels at it. Yeah, the ordinals are now existing, and I think there could be some use cases that are interesting, like publishing documents that people don't want you to publish on a decentralized network where it can't be stopped. But at the same time, I think that NFTs are generally, especially on chains that have a reputation of rolling their history back, are just digital receipts. They're like an author's signature on a certificate of authentication. In terms of like RSK and colored coins, I think there's some interesting applications on Liquid that kind of hit some of those high points. But Bitcoin doesn't need to do all those things, but it might very well be able to in the future.
Yeah.
Real quick.
I'm sorry, I just want to say, we have to pick our battles. And there's one key problem facing the world, and that's fiat money. If you study history, that's the root of the world's problems. All these other experiments, they're great, I participate in them, but from a question of how to promote liberty best, we need to pick our battle, and if we solve the root of the problem, which is government control for the money supply, we create a space for liberty, everything else will follow.
All right. We're going to go to audience questions. Now I'm going to, as moderator, ask the first two questions because I can. Now first up, so if you guys want to ask a question, we have the mic up here, so you can walk up to the mic and ask your question there. I want to clarify, when you ask your question, make sure it's a question, do not pontificate, and you get no follow-ups unless the speakers ask you to clarify something. So again, no follow-ups unless they ask you for one. So I'm going to ask my first question for Team Bitcoin. I'm going to do one question for each team, and then we'll move to the audience. So for Team Bitcoin, in the event of a massive coordinated attack on Bitcoin by government entities, isn't it a massive advantage to have other potential chains to pivot to? Doesn't the very existence of other chains make the idea of taking down Bitcoin less realistic?
So I think in general, if a government because a lot of these other cryptocurrencies, blockchains are essentially duplicates of Bitcoin, poor replicas. If a government entity can coordinate and take down Bitcoin, no other blockchain has a hope or a prayer. So I think if Bitcoin goes, the rest of them do too. So and I think in general, in terms of like diversification, Saylor often says that diversification is selling your winners for your losers, and Bitcoin Tina is quoted saying it's diversification. And so I like all my there's a I think it's a J.P. Morgan quote, Pierpont Morgan. He says put all your eggs in one basket and watch it very closely. Maybe that's I don't know, could be someone else who said that. Warren Buffett says that. Someone says that.
Yeah, I would just add, Bitcoin's number one competitor in the crypto space is not other cryptocurrencies, but stable coins, right? Which are far, obviously, more vulnerable they're all centralized, like today, and they're far more vulnerable to government control. So yeah, that is what governments will attack first. And they have attacked crypto assets, and they didn't come after Bitcoin. They came after everyone else because everyone else is much more centralized, right? So by encouraging people to put their wealth into these assets that are much more vulnerable to government control, you're harming the world's poor, right? People in Nigeria and Africa, in countries like Turkey and Egypt that have a government, 50% inflation rates per year, you're harming them by telling them to go into crypto assets like stable coins that are much more vulnerable to confiscation.
Okay, my question for Team Ethereum. So a lot of the non-Bitcoin, or sorry, my bad. My question was kind of around Ethereum. That was my fault. Many of the non-Bitcoin projects don't seem to include freedom as a core part of their ethos. I think Ethereum is probably the best example of this. ETH seems to be largely trending towards more centralizations, including the blockchain, total block size, validator cost. Doesn't this kind of go against the ethos of Satoshi, and doesn't this create a major single point of failure?
Two things here. Two points here. One is more cultural, one is more technical. On the cultural thing, so this is one thing for everybody that's more of a Bitcoin maxi type. Like, there's these caricatures of these, the Bitcoin camp, the Ethereum camp, and Bitcoiners eat steak and are very serious, and this is a honey badger, and fuck you, we're libertarians. And then Ethereum is, we're all wearing like unicorn shirts and doing mushrooms, and maybe we're socialists or something. These are just characters, man. Like, when I started the Ethereum meetup, there was 10 dudes, all of us Bitcoiners, and all dudes, because back then it was all dudes, sitting in a dive bar talking about, is this ever going to work? Fast forward to February, we had 15,000 people in Denver talking about building on all sorts of decentralized technology, including Bitcoin, including, I'm blanking, one of the projects building on Bitcoin. I reject the notion or the idea that Ethereum isn't, building on Ethereum is not pro-freedom. We may not in Ethereum be sort of explicit about like saying this is libertarian or whatever, but if you look at what's being built, Ethereum, I think the ecosystem has always had a commitment to decentralization, and this is kind of getting into the technical stuff. It took Ethereum a while to implement proof of stake because the desire was to implement a mechanism that was maximally decentralized and kind of thought through all the game theory, because proof of stake has been done before, but there's a lot of risks there. In a similar fashion, scaling, and you kind of brought this up earlier, David, you can scale really easy by throwing some databases in there. But Ethereum, had this long sort of community-wide discussion about what do we do. It lasted years. It settled on roll-ups where you kind of have a layer 2, and then you use the mainnet security to back it up. So far, that's working pretty well. But I don't think in any respect Ethereum has sacrificed decentralization. Now, you can argue, is Ethereum more or less decentralized than Bitcoin? You get into some interesting technical arguments. But again, the litmus test. I ask you guys, pick your favorite Ethereum DApp, maybe Uniswap, the most popular one, a decentralized exchange. Has anybody shut it down? Could anybody shut it down? Ethereum has had 100% liveness, maybe with like one or two weird exceptions that Vitalik actually pointed out to me on Twitter and kind of owed me on. But it was like very small exceptions. It basically had 100% uptime. There was the DAO where immutability was violated. This happened a year after Ethereum went live, and that kind of went against the crypto ethos. On a similar note, though, Bitcoin had a similar rollback violating immutability a year after it went live. This was Ethereum's sort of mulligan and do-over. I don't think it'll ever happen again. If it does, I'm out. I'll go to fucking Neo or something, or Cosmos. And I think that's a common sentiment. So, again, I look at what's happening. There's tons of money in this space. People are trusting this decentralized settlement layer. Now, if it turns out that all of a sudden it's getting attacked, then okay, well, something has changed. But again, I think it's good to have a diverse set of tech stacks too. Sorry. Yeah.
I don't remember what the question was. I'm just going to kind of spin off this. I think it had something to do with communities, groups of people, and the ability to scale for them. The project I work on, we work with people from China, Russia, South America, Europe, America, all over, and not one of us is like, I fucking love my government. This is why we're here, to keep doing, what we've already been doing. All of us are united in our ideals of building a newer, smarter economy and a way to digitize assets for people to gain access to them and to move them freely between one another on an open, permissionless network. And if for some reason the network that I'm working on fails, then there is a layer 0. There's a social layer of hundreds of people that are working on architecture, programming, code, writing, you name it. We'll just pick up our community and start building somewhere else. And this is the ethos, I think, that Satoshi had with the cypherpunks, is there was a community of people who wanted to use cryptography to skirt the way that governments have controls over us. And because of the network that I'm a part of, I've gotten to collaborate with hundreds of people across the world who will continue building this vision, even if this iteration of the network we're working on dies.
Can I make a quick point in response to your question, Josh?
Yeah.
I think that you have to go back to the reality. Proof of stake was a failed compromise to the decentralization. Now I think like 60% of Ethereum stakers are OFAC compliant. They're obedient to the government's rulings about who should be banned from the network. Tornado Cash was killed. The smart contract is out there, but it's neutralized. The website all the infrastructure is gone. You can't really use it anymore. So yeah, like Ethereum has been totally compromised by governments because of its design choices, because it chose profit over some money. Intentions are fine, but the technical reality is Ethereum is not suited to save the world.
So this
Real quick, and then we're going to go to audience questions.
So this underscores the need for decentralized front end. So the important thing is, again, like Ethereum is not prioritizing some idea of like profit over something. The idea is to have unstoppable code. The code is still there. If we have decentralized front ends, people can access it. To your point about censorship, a lot of this has to do with miner extracted value, validator extracted value. This gets really complicated, but even with that many validator censoring transactions, it would take an extra few blocks to go through. So this is definitely something that we need to be mindful of. But Bitcoin is not immune to the censorship issue either. Like miners potentially could also censor transactions. I saw a few maximalists saying that in fact miners should censor ordinal transactions. So there's also that attack vector as well.
First audience question. Make sure the mic is on.
Yes, hello. As much as I appreciate your guys' knowledge and your presentations, I thought they were very good and articulate. You did mention that you're basically all on the same side. I was hoping for some people that would be against the whole thing.
We need another debate
to present their.
Yeah, we'll do that debate in a few months.
But my point is, so there is another narrative out there, which is the goal of the powers that be is to get everybody on centralized digital currency, right? But that part of that is that we're being told a David and Goliath story, which is you guys are David and you're the good guys, but you're serving a function which is to eventually get us all into the centralized digital currency. And so so my question is,
okay, get to the question.
Yeah, there's no follow-up. That's the Mike Chappelle rule that we put in there. Okay, so my question is there anyone else from the other side, as I described it, that you guys would say they speak your language, you respect them, and if you were going to have them here, who would they be? Or is it just inconceivable for you?
I would have Senator or Congressman Patrick McHenry, who's putting forth a bill right now to create a guideline for what cryptocurrencies are and aren't in the United States. I think that we really need to start garnering support for the senators and congressmen who are starting to be pro-crypto, because that includes Bitcoin. Arguably, I would be equally concerned that we see BlackRock and Fidelity and all these large-scale institutions who are clamoring for ETFs right now when Coinbase and Gemini and these long-standing centralized institutions are being hammered by the SEC right now. So I think that we do need to be unified because we are in the they're fighting crypto moment right now.
Just real quick, I like Peter Schiff. He's a gold bug. I mean, I like gold. If I thought gold could save the world, I'd be totally for it. But we saw 100 years ago that governments can co-opt gold savings far too easily. And so the only solution we have is a truly decentralized standard.
Next question.
All right. So modern cryptocurrency is built on one-way differential equations and computers' inability to backsolve them. That's the entire reason cryptocurrency can exist and not be replicated. I'm curious what the future of rigid cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, because that protocol is fairly rigid, is in the quantum age when the one-way differential equations can be backsolved. What is the future for it? Can it exist?
Yeah, I think quantum computing sounds great in theory, but in practice, it's a lot less attractive. I think we're a ways off from quantum computing. I think it's a lot of buzzwords, and I think in the unlikely event that some quantum computing breakthrough occurs, there's ways to upgrade Bitcoin to quantum resistant cryptography, but I very much doubt that that's anywhere in the near horizon.
Yeah, I can actually comment on this because I have an account at IBM Cloud which provides access to real quantum hardware that I've run. It can accelerate certain operations, some of which are used by Bitcoin, not the key storage itself. So quantum computers are not magic. They accelerate certain mathematical transformations, some of which are used by Bitcoin. If they're ever become fast enough that they can accomplish those operations, Bitcoin will move to quantum resistant math. We require protocol change. We already know what those operations are. That need is probably decades away, so it's not a real problem.
I think I would also add that cryptocurrencies and digital asset networks are among the last things that we would need to be concerned about once quantum cryptography can be kind of smashed. We're also going to start worrying about the institutions that hold our funds in their bank accounts, the United States government who has our own data and PII. So this is an issue that's not just unique to cryptocurrencies themselves, but it's sort of like if the world ends, do I really want to have a dollar bill in my hand or do I want to have cans of beans and guns?
Next question.
Hi. To be honest, a lot of what was said kind of went over my head because I don't know a lot about computer programming, and I was just curious, is there a way for people, like average people that don't know a lot about computer programming to obtain or invest in Bitcoin or other crypto? Just wondering.
So this is a cool question because I sense there might be other people coming from the same sort of area. So I would start by doing a few things. We talked about Bitcoin and Ethereum. There's a guy named Andreas Antonopoulos who's really good at explaining this stuff. Search for some of his videos talking about both Bitcoin and Ethereum. Learn kind of some of the principles here. Learn about what we've been talking about. What is sound money? Why is it desirable? And why is Ethereum useful as well? To the point of investing in it, it's as simple as going to Coinbase and connecting your bank account and then purchasing Bitcoin or Ether or a variety of other tokens. With the additional caveat, and I can't stress this enough, once you have an appreciable amount of that money, basically enough to where if you lost it, it would be a really bad day, whatever that number is for you, learn about hardware wallets, get I used to recommend a Ledger, but what the fuck, did they like a Trezor or a KeepKey, or get a hardware wallet, learn about a hardware wallet, get your money off the exchange. And I think we can all agree on this. Not your keys, not your coins. You must own your private keys. So Coinbase, once you have enough money, move it to a hardware wallet.
I will just take this opportunity to show all of us. I have a podcast called the Smart Economy Podcast where we talk about the basics and ongoings in the crypto space. Kent here is a steward for ETH Denver. That's an event that you can go to learn about the Ethereum ecosystem. Tyler hosts bi-monthly meetups for Bitcoin and beer. And then David is actually hosts meetups as well, and he's hosting one on Friday about AI. So all of us are out there in the community trying to educate as well. So find teachers.
Everything they said, I will just add one book recommendation, The Bitcoin Standard by Saifi Dinanous. It's a fantastic book. It's very non-technical.
Thank you. Next question.
So you guys mentioned the cipher.
Speak into the mic, please.
So Bitcoin is basically like the brainchild of like the cypherpunks, and they're big on building anonymous systems and private electronic money. And given that Bitcoin is like not private at all, and all the ways to make it private, you have to jump through all kinds of hoops, and you have to be really technical. Why should people choose Bitcoin over like Monero, which is private by default? It's proof of work, censorship resistant, just like Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, most people, the on-ramps and off-ramps are centralized exchanges where you have to provide your ID and everything. So right there, all your Bitcoin is attached to your ID for most people that own it.
So there's plenty of, that's called KYC, know your customer. There's plenty of exchanges, entities, methodologies to acquire Bitcoin without KYC. Won't dive into those right now, but there's a lot. And what was the... oh yeah, okay, so Bitcoin's pseudonymous, not anonymous. And so, like getting back to like litmus tests, you know, Satoshi Nakamoto, no one's really sure who, what, whom, you know, no one really knows who that entity is, and it kind of proves that Bitcoin's pseudonymous. And I think the reason that Bitcoin addresses, and the blockchain itself is fully auditable, is in part to ensure the enforcement of the monetary policy, which is first and foremost to make sure that the scarcity rules are enforced and that coins aren't issued erroneously. And that, I think things like Monero, they are proof of work. They claim they're ASIC resistant, but ASIC resistance is kind of an oxymoron. There's no algorithm that cannot be optimized with application-specific integrated circuitry. The way the way Monero gets around it is by changing their hashing algorithm every so often to fork off people that have created hardware specific to that coin. And so I think the big thing is that that creates a centralization risk, and it's one of the trade-offs like that we were kind of talking about earlier.
Let me just repeat what you said in a little more non-technical terms. One, Monero cannot be audited, which I don't trust. Number two is it can never scale to be the world's money. It's just way too slow. So the Bitcoin is still number one.
Next question.
Yeah, so I actually have a question for Team Crypto. So like, I was curious, like, how do you know you can trust ETH or other altcoins against state attacks compared to Bitcoin, especially whenever ETH isn't even the original coin? Obviously, ETH Classic is the original coin. And then also something with, against state attacks, each roadmap is always changing. So like, whenever it comes to time that the government and all these countries are rolling out things like CBDCs, and Vitalik, in my opinion, is like a centralized person that controls a lot of Ethereum, especially with the ETH Foundation. I'm just curious, how do you know you can trust that ETH or other cryptocurrencies will be able to prevent state attacks whenever we saw that whenever China tried to shut off Bitcoin, it was more decentralized?
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in real quick. I would like to state that I think the opposing team was probably right. If Bitcoin is ever state censored, then we're all fucked. But for a highly complex and nuanced subject, for me it's the Lindy effect. The longer something is around, the longer it's more likely to survive. So each passing year that these networks continue to survive and they're not snuffed out by the market, shaking them out, then you're probably going to see them stick around longer.
Also, I don't necessarily know that that's the case, that if Bitcoin was attacked, Ethereum also goes down, because that's one great thing about humanity having two consensus mechanisms behind these two biggest blockchains, because these are two very different attack vectors, attacking the energy producing or energy using miners versus or an economic attack on proof of stake. It's wonderful that we have this robustness in both. With respect to your question, so I could ramble, but I wrote an article called Ethereum is not decentralized in other myths, and I kind of, if you can Google that, you kind of dig into this. But Vitalik, yes, is a very influential part of the Ethereum community, and you know, it's not like Satoshi. We have our Satoshi. He's a real person. You can go talk to him and tweet at him. He's a dude, and yes, he has a lot of influence, but he doesn't have, and this is like a common misnomer with Bitcoiners who aren't involved in the Ethereum ecosystem, he doesn't have like carte blanche, he can't just dictate what happens. A good example of this is there was a debate about how to scale Ethereum, and he was sort of promoting something called Plasma, but then this other thing came out, and you know, ultimately conversation went that way. Vitalik also, or the Ethereum Foundation, let's say they decided to do something that would favor the state. Let's give all our money to China or something. You know, something retarded. Ultimately, the validators, the network would have to opt into that. And you know, similar to David's point about securing the network, the role of validators or stakers is to secure Ethereum and nodes. You wouldn't just mindlessly go along with some sort of state attack thing that they foisted on it. To address your question about ETH versus ETC, yes, ETC represented the original chain where the DAO attack did happen. The reason you can trust Ethereum more and quantify that trust is because there's a lot of economic security behind it. And then kind of to Dylan's point, look at the Lindy effect. To this day, nobody has been able to attack it. There's actually finally one way in which I think Ethereum has superior decentralization. That's in, there's more clients. By clients, I mean separate types of computer programs backing the network. Bitcoin, I think, mainly has one, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, there's like one primary Bitcoin client that most people use. Ethereum has like a whole multitude of these, like, 5 or 6. This has proven very effective. Somebody tried to DDoS attack Ethereum back in 2016. They took down one of the clients, the other one is still going, and it had liveness. So there's a lot of nuance. I just encourage anybody who's only in the Bitcoin side, like Ethereum, the Ethereum ecosystem really does care about decentralization. Like, explore this stuff a little bit. Don't listen to these fire-breathing maxis that are very almost religious and dogmatic. We're all on the same team.
Like, I know you guys said no follow-ups.
Sorry, no follow-up. We have 2 more questions, though, and we will go through those 2 questions, so ignore the time for now. We'll do those 2 questions, which will go past the time. So, next question.
Hi. So, I think there's a lot of talk about technology here, but I think we forget the point that liberty is maximized through the formation of wealth. It's afforded to you, it's not really a God-given right. Be that as it may, there's some people in the world who are so damn poor, they just wake up every day and they think about where their next meal is going to come from. Take a single trip to Latin America, you'll see that very quickly. And either team can answer this question. Do you think Bitcoin is the best tool for people in that position to form wealth?
I think the power that decentralized networks and the tokens that power them offer is that 1/3 of the world was not allowed access to a banking account before 2009, and after, there's now a international permissionless, borderless network that anybody can transact on as long as they have the internet and a wallet. So, what's that?
Safe housing.
So, so just being able to access a market and being able to transact with people across the world, I think right there offers an opportunity for people to increase their ability to drive wealth. Let's say I want to buy some sort of sombrero that's unique to a sub-region in Argentina. In 2001, I wouldn't have been able to do that with a credit card, but today they can accept ETH or USDT or Bitcoin or whatever.
Just to mention, sometime in the 2000s, less than 10% of the world remains in poverty. So 90% plus of the world has now risen above the poverty line. So if there was one wish I could make for the world that would fix the most problems, it would be to take your wealth with you and escape whatever bad regime you're under. If we could just do that in every country in the world, there'd be so much pressure on governments to not abuse their citizens. And that's the one problem I want to solve that I think will have the most impact.
Last question.
He called the last two questions.
You're David, right? Okay. My question is for David. You said earlier that Bitcoin can just adopt what another project does if they do it well. And so by that argument, aren't you saying that other projects should exist and that they will promote liberty by the promotion of innovation? If we believe, as the liberty community, in free markets, and we believe in competition as an effective path towards expanding liberty, do you truly believe we should stop at Bitcoin, or should we let the market decide which level of decentralization, privacy, and usability they want outside of government-manipulated currencies?
I mean, the market will decide, right? No matter what, the market will decide who wins. And it should be that way. And we should have experiments. But the question is, when we promote liberty, when we say, what do we spend our time advocating for the world? What do I want to focus on? Do I want to have people buying NFTs and buying all these shitcoin projects that are going to fail? Or do I want everybody to have access to the global sound money? Because that is a natural monopoly that the world moves toward. There's always one major reserve currency. So the question is, in terms of how I promote liberty, I will focus exclusively on Bitcoin.
Anyone else want to comment?
Yeah. I think to David's point, about maybe 5 months ago, you would have heard every single person who holds Bitcoin, especially the miners, shitting on DeFi and shitting on NFTs. And then when ordinals came around, let's see this. Ordinals was basically a way for inscriptions to happen on the Bitcoin network for people to essentially point towards things like NFTs and create basic things like DeFi, basic iterations of DeFi. This year, since January of 2023, approximately 22% of all the fees that miners have received are from ordinal-based transactions. And we're moving towards a world where there are not going to be subsidies for Bitcoin miners anymore. There's going to need to be demand on the network. And so to sit here and say that Bitcoin can only be a sovereign store of wealth for individuals who hodl it, what happens when there's no activity on the network anymore because there's nothing but people holding? So I think that having this free market, it already is speaking, and having these other opportunities that are out there, NFTs and DeFi, are already being added to Bitcoin because the market wants that.
All right, so now we're going to move to closing statements. So 5 minutes, closing statements. Team Bitcoin will go first, and then Team Crypto will close us out.
Give me a second.
We will give her 30 seconds to get the time working.
Kira's making it happen behind the scenes.
There you go.
All right. So talked about expansion of liberty. I think the biggest source of liberty restrictions globally today is the money. Abraham Lincoln once said that money power preys on the nation in times of peace. It is more despotic than monarchy, more insolent than autocracy, more selfish than bureaucracy. It denounces its public enemies, all who question its methods or throw light upon its crimes. And so the free market can decide all of these discussions we're having. The free market will decide. But I would argue today we do not have a free market, in part because we do not have a free money. And money is information. Money is the communication mechanism for entities participating in that free market. So manipulated money distorts the market signals to all various participants, causing market failure. Money is the most important good in the economy, and I think to fully free the money, to fully free the market, we must free the money, which would then free the world.
Let me just remind you that the question we're asking tonight is what should we focus on to maximize liberty across the world? Not are these other projects worthwhile? They are, but what will maximize liberty? We all have limited time on the world. We have limited time to invest in activism. So what should we focus on to maximize liberty across the world? And I would focus on addressing the root of the world's problem. The root of the problem is that governments abuse their citizens. They steal their wealth by confiscation and by inflation. And if we can fix that one problem, we'll fix so many more. And we have a solution to that, that's Bitcoin. And I just don't want us to get distracted by pushing all these other projects that distract us our limited time from solving this key problem. So I don't want people to get rugged by investing in scams, even though some of these projects are good and experiments are good, and I want there to be 1,000 flowers blooming. But in terms of how focusing on liberty, let's focus on Bitcoin. I believe in DeFi. It's certainly going to be huge in the future, but today it does not solve key problems. Today, the only way you can really restrict governments is by having a global sound money. The dollar will collapse sooner or later, and I want Bitcoin to be ready in place and be used by the world to take its place. So I don't want to confuse the world about the key problem, and I want to have, I want to spend my time focusing just on Bitcoin so that it's ready to take the dollar's place.
You think the government...
No. Sorry, no. Anyways.
You think that's...
Hey, whoa, dude, seriously, come on. You can ask them questions afterwards. We're trying to end the debate.
So, I reject the false dichotomy. Like, I want to reiterate what I said at the start of this. Like, this idea that it has to be Bitcoin or this. It's not a false dichotomy. I love that you guys are working on Bitcoin. Like, you seem like very smart dudes, and you live and breathe the liberty ethos. I'm glad that you're working on this stuff. If Ethereum didn't exist, I'd probably still be working in the Bitcoin space. I fucking love Bitcoin. I'm glad it exists. But it's a false dichotomy to say that this should be the exclusive focus of everybody. There's a lot of humans on this planet, and there's a lot of problems to solve. Sound money is certainly one of them, but a global surveillance state is another. There's a lot of problems with for example, at the government level, with sort of coercion and I'm sorry, I'm looking for the right term, misappropriated funds. We need more transparency. The sound money thing will not happen overnight. I don't know when the dollar will collapse. It may take decades. We live in this current world right now. Even in a world where we have Bitcoin and sound money everywhere, we need other solutions. We need an expressive global settlement layer that does more than that. And I also reject the notion that what's happening in other chains, for example, DeFi or NFTs, is an experiment. Consider that people are paying roughly more, I think last I checked, it's something like 5 times as much to use the Ethereum network, fees to use the Ethereum than they are on Bitcoin. The site is called cryptofees.org. It's something to that effect. So the free market has spoken. The free market is not saying these are just experiments. People are using this stuff because they have value. Why do they have value? Because centralization poses risks and problems in all its various forms. We saw this vividly last year with centralized lenders, with centralized, like FTX. Holy shit! Like this is why we have decentralized exchanges. We can't trust people. We can't trust human beings with this stuff. We'd much rather trust code, unstoppable code. The crypto gods are thundering at us. I guess, yeah, I'll leave the last minute half to Dylan, but I just want to say again, we are all on the same team. Reject this notion of us versus them. Crypto is not a zero-sum game. It's easy to look at the price of like Bitcoin versus ETH and maxis on either side will be like, oh yeah, fuck that. See, we're doing better right now. It's like a football game. That's not what it's about. We're trying to make the world a freer place. That's our true measure of success. If you're an Ethereum maxi, I encourage you to kind of listen to what these guys are saying and like understand why sound money is so important. If you're more of a Bitcoin maxi and you think that Ethereum is all scams and there's no commitment to decentralization, I'm telling you from my heart, that is not the case. So let's think bigger. The real enemy, the real thing we're fighting is the centralized institutions that want to control humanity. We can do this together.
I think the thing that's funniest about me being a shitcoiner and working for a shit blockchain project that's not.
And there were 6 undecided, 3 undecided disappeared.
The reason I'm here is because I
They didn't vote,
Bitcoin
which is very
first.
unfortunate.
That was my
Those are the people who needed this decision. So the disagree went up by 1, which means Team Crypto won by 1 vote.
And so we're talking how can blockchain networks improve our opportunities.
It will hold up under
a government that can basically stamp us out, and we have these tools that are available, but we can't, manage to find the blueprints for these weapons to fight up against our oppressors. Should this information be stored on a decentralized, blockchain-enabled network, anyone can access these blueprints everywhere, and now you have an opportunity where they can't be stamped out by an oppressive individual. This is the opportunity that is offered by decentralization and blockchain networks. Is the example I'm using a little bit draconian and maybe scary? Yes, but it highlights exactly what we're talking about here, Kent and I, that go beyond just Bitcoin, go beyond just Bitcoin as the sole network that will enable us to have true freedom. If you think about it, when we put our money into bank accounts, the bank lends our money out, they earn interest on it, and we get a measly 1% back. With decentralized finance that's empowered and enabled by other blockchain networks, we're autonomous owners of our digital assets, and we earn and receive the yield that we should get for lending our assets to others. And this is just another type of opportunity for empowerment that blockchain networks offer people who have access to these resources and want to use them in a way that they want.
That's our debate. Give it up for the panel. Give us about 5 to 10 minutes. Everybody, if you got a ticket early, please go vote. Again, voting's in the same place. So despite how civil that debate was, we do actually want to have a winner and loser. So please go vote, and in the next 10 minutes, we will announce who actually won. Thanks. And there were 6 undecided, 3 undecided disappeared. They didn't vote, which is very unfortunate because those are the people we needed to stand the decision. So the disagree went up by 1, which means Team Crypto won by 1 vote.
All right.
It was a perfectly valid method of
Stop the steal.
It will hold up under a court of law. Thank you all for coming.
Come on, let's get out of here. Okay. Good job. How you doing?